Thank you, Holly, for the kind words. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I can't tell you how much I'm so impressed that you're all here, because this is a big fight. And I've been at this on my own for a while. And like Holly said, I can't do it on my own. When I began my journey, it began with the knowledge that something was wrong. But I knew several things were going to have to happen. One, I lacked the political ability. In other words, I wasn't politically connected. Two, I didn't have the financial resources. And three, I knew that in the end, our politics is predicated on, there's an old saying, politics is practiced by the majority that participate. And until we change collectively the will of the people to choose for themselves how to change the course of our government, that we are going to continue to be in this nightmare that we're in now. Because in the end, that's what a Republican form of government is all about, the representative will of the people. And so with that, I want to give a little bit of testimony about my personal situation. Those of you who know me very well know that I had surgery recently. And I want to thank you all for all the prayers, because I can tell you that I had rotator cuff surgery and I came out of it really fast. A lot faster, because I had damaged both shoulders at the same time. And I went through this thing with unbelievable speed. The recovery is extraordinary, and I can only thank all of you who prayed for me, so thank you. And so now I'm back in the fight. So my left arm is coming back a lot better. And the other thing is, I had the common cold over the last few days, so I'm a little nasally. How do I know it was the common cold? Because I didn't lose my taste, my smell, my blood oxygen stayed very high, and guess what? We do have a thing called the common cold. That's why I'm nasally now. But guess what? It's not COVID, and even if it was, God's got his hand out. So having said that, please forgive me. I'm gonna do my best to bring to you my message today. And my message today has to do with individual responsibility. In Article 38 of our state constitution, give me a second here, I'll pull this up. How many rights do we have under the state constitution?
39.
Close. 39, that's right. 38 was the original count. And the founding fathers, after they identified your 38 enumerated rights, and that's not the end. These are what we call the laws of the land. The laws of the land are required due process of law. What does that mean? That means that each and every provision of the state constitution, there's 101 articles, and a couple of minor, there's a few add-ons that are A's and B's now. But either way, each of them requires every public official who swears an oath of allegiance has to provide and swear that oath to uphold those laws. And those laws of the land are each article of the Constitution. And here's Article 38. The reason it's so important is this. After identifying those rights the government is obligated to protect, they then tell us what our duties are. What are our individual responsibilities and duties? And here they are. Article 38, social virtues inculcated. A frequent recurrence to the fundamental principles of the Constitution. How about that? How often do we do that? We don't do that at all. Most of the people have not even known that there was a state constitution or that there's a state Bill of Rights. But that was what the founding fathers said was necessary. And it goes on to say, and a constant adherence to justice, moderation, temperance, industry, frugality, and all the social virtues are indispensably necessary to preserve the blessings of liberty and good government. The people ought, therefore, to have a particular regard to all of those principles in the choice of their officers and representatives. Think about that. When was the last time that we thought about that? The Democratic Party wouldn't exist if that was true. Think about that. If we held that standard to know that they were good and honorable people, that those things that we hold near and dear to our hearts were a prerequisite and knowledge of how we elect our public officials. And again, this was deprived from all of us. I learned this only in the last 10 years. So it's no surprise that culturally we don't even know this. To continue. And they have a right to require of their lawgivers lawgivers and magistrates. You notice it says lawgivers, not lawmakers. Who makes the law? You do. The laws of the land can only be altered, amended, or abolished by we the people. Public officials and the politicians in our government can only do those things that we've assigned for them to do. They can do no other, because the powers of the federal government and the state government can only, the supremacy clause, for example, Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution says, this Constitution and the laws of the United States that shall be made pursuant thereof is saying exactly that. It's saying that the government can only make and do those things we delegate to them. Hawley made a very good point. DHHS has no constitutional authority. Our state constitution has only 11 assigned job assignments. That's it. Go to the executive branch today at newhampshire.gov. You'll find almost 250 agencies. Guess what? They're all federally funded. Department of Education, DHHS. And I'll get on to what's going on with the federal funding in a minute, but I'm making the point that this has been going on a very long time. They have a right to require of their lawgivers and magistrates, and here's the catch, an exact and constant observance of them in the formation and the execution of the laws necessary for a good administration of government. Have we been doing that? What about all these remote meetings? How are we going to have an exact and constant observance of them and hold them to account?
All illegal.
It's all illegal. And they get away with it. Why?
No one holds them accountable.
No one holds them accountable is exactly right. And it's frightening, because here's the really frightening news. You know that there's no statutory provisions for the Attorney General to protect you? I met Gordon McDonald, my representative Ray Howard and I, when I filed an ethics committee complaint against the Democrats for concealing my remonstrance the first time around. When I filed that ethics committee complaint, which I had to do by sworn affidavit, when I did so, I walked downstairs. I was going to meet my rep in the State House cafeteria, and I ran into the old Attorney General, who's now the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court, who, by the way, has never served as a judge. Imagine that. He never once served as a judge. And Chris Sununu, in order to protect himself, put him on the highest bench. It's appalling. But I ran into him, and the place was empty. The only two people were he and I and the staff cooking behind the grill. Got to speak with him for a few minutes, about 15 minutes or so. And I said to him, I said, you know, I saw that you established a new civil rights division. And I said, I only have one problem with it. I said, as a straight white Christian man, you won't protect me. You're only going to protect a minority class. So if any actor in state government violates my state or federal constitutional rights, you won't protect me. You have no obligation to protect me. I'm going to go back to Article 38. You know why? It's because we are responsible for that. And we are only capable of doing so by knowing our rights. And that's why they took it away from us. Those of you who have come to some of my speaking engagements before have known that I've talked about the two important historical events that I found in my research. in 1831 and in 1903, 70 years later, that apathy in our culture about civics has been a recurring problem. In 1831, the man who wrote the document, John Farnham, he wrote a teaching constitution, and he identified that 55 years after the Declaration of Independence, the people had already become apathetic. The young people had stopped taking an interest in the most important document in their lives, the state constitution. Because the federal wasn't written for you, it was written for the states. And so, this is repeated 70 years later in 1903, where the state legislature did in fact reinstate civics, not social studies. Not people telling our kids how to interpret whether A, B, or C is appropriate. Rather, civics, what our rights are, what our state constitution says, and how our government ought to work. And so this is a repeated warning throughout history that if you let these things fall by the wayside, we find ourselves where we are today. And so we have to take ownership for that, collectively. Look, I used to be one of those people. I raised my hand twice to swear an oath of allegiance to a document I never read or really didn't understand. Once when I became naturalized, I'm a Canadian immigrant, and that was in 1981. And then 2 months later, when I joined the Air Force, I swore the oath a second time. And I did like everyone else. I just raised my hand, swore the oath, and did not understand my duty. Who here has taken their state citizenship oath up until now? And how many of you have gone on to read your state constitution? Good. You need more homework, folks. More homework. The next thing, the secondary homework I need you to do is look up New Hampshire Committee of Safety from the constitutional period. Because that's one of the things we're going to talk about today, is what we're going to do to move forward. Because when I mentioned to Holly and others about resurrecting what the Founding Fathers had done in the absence of any legitimate government, remember when the Founding Fathers put a cannon in front of Governor Whitmer's mansion and said, "You gotta go." I love that story, but what did they do? The provincial Congress, the province, the people of New Hampshire, the political class assembled. That's what all of you here are doing today, by the way. And this is what we need to keep doing. In the absence of a legitimate, lawful government, we should and ought to continue to assemble and work together to bring forward a resolution. Because what they did is that they assembled together and said, we're now going to create or elect a committee of safety. And they elected 5 men during that period to be the temporary executive.